I worked for a few years as a medical laboratory assistant, doing a lot of microbiology work, maintaining lab equipment, and just basic laboratory tasks, lower level laboratory tasks. Schedule was really flexible to help with my bass fishing tournament schedules and being in school. And I learned a lot from that experience that I tried to directly apply to bass fishing and bass fishing tournaments, which is what I care about. But I think some of those lessons that I learned would be applicable to other areas of life as well. Or if I had a different passion, or if you had a different passion, or specifically a goal that you're working towards, some of these frameworks might help with that. So the first one that really changed the way I view pursuing my goals was the idea of downtime tasks. So at the lab, we have an ebb and flow in terms of the amount of work that's coming in. So sometimes there's a ton of work with multiple projects running at one time. And then there's lulls where there's not a lot of work coming in because we run different projects, and sometimes there's a couple projects going and sometimes there's only one project going. So we have this thing called downtime tasks, which is a list of basic important things: cleaning certain types of equipment, making parts of these kits that we would send out, different things that we could do during downtime when the main tasks that we would normally do aren't required. There's not a ton of extra work coming in, not as many new projects that we're trying to develop new procedures for. So I applied this concept to bass fishing, and of course it could be applied to anything else, because I spend all of my time now working and prepping for tournament bass fishing, thinking about it. And the most important thing in bass fishing is time on the water. So that's what I define as work, is time on the water, because that's what's going to get me closest towards my goal in bass fishing. So that's the equivalent to all the main tasks at the lab, right? That's what I want. I want to spend as much time on the water as possible. Downtime occurs when I can't do that. So when all the lakes are locked up and I don't have the money or the ability to travel super far to put time on the water, or like right now, my boat's in the shop, it's broken down. I had a piece of equipment go out and it's getting warranted right now. Ted's Boat Ramen is doing a great job getting that fixed up for me. But currently, I don't have my boat and I have to wait. And when this would happen in the past, because in bass fishing, your equipment breaks all the time, right? So you have these periods, especially since I don't have a backup boat or anything like that, I have these periods of downtime. And I guess if I was pursuing a different goal or something else, that would be, life hits you and knocks you down, and you can't, you can't do the things that you really want to be doing to pursue your goal. So you have to settle for these downtime tasks. And before I really applied this concept, it was pretty, what's a good word for it? It was pretty demoralizing when the boat would go down like that, because I have blocked out and scheduled out and taken a lot of time to make time for time on the water. So now I've got all this open space and I feel like I'm being unproductive. It's depressing, right? Because you really want to go out there and get the work, figure these things out, figure out new techniques, all that stuff. And now I can't. So it's tempting to just sleep in. I mean, there's really right, what's the point? What's the point of getting out of bed? There's nothing to do. But there are downtime tasks. So in fishing, that is working on tackle, research and prep for these tournaments, looking at satellite imagery, what I call mental cross training. Or I go to the library and I get books that are kind of peripherally related to the skills that I need to learn to be successful in bass fishing, on the business side of bass fishing. The books that I think might help with the psychology of the sport, stuff like that. So reading, educating, working on that, working on research, downtime tasks that I do, working on the boat. I've struggled with organization for a long time. I've had several co-anglers tell me, a lot of the pros, or the best guys that I fish with are really organized, which is their way of saying you're not really organized. And I remember I used to get in trouble way back in the day in grade school for not being organized. I couldn't organize anything. My desk was a mess. When I'd hand in papers, they'd be, water stained and ripped to pieces and all that. So I've been working on that. I know where everything is, all the things that break on my boat, and that's a really important downtime task. These are extremely important. They're important in the lab, and I've realized unfortunately, somewhat recently, they're really important in bass fishing. So an example of a failure to complete these downtime tasks and use my downtime in a productive way is I fished a college tournament on Saginaw Bay, and I used to have Humminbird 360 on my boat. I didn't know where some of my tools were. I had them all jumbled up in this box that was missing latches, so they were spilled all over the bottom of my boat. I'm running 5-6 foot waves, and my 360 transducer comes off. All right, so the wire's dangling and it's smashing into my front graph. So I kill it because I don't want to smash my front graph. That's more valuable to me than the 360. And I'm like, all right, I got to get my Allen key. I got to take this off. Another piece of context is I'm going to be late for weigh-in. I'm way out in the bay. I have to get in. I had to stay a little bit longer because I didn't make it happen on my initial smallmouth spot. I had 3 in the box. I was like, okay, I got to go catch a limit. And then I got to make it in. So I'm on a time crunch, really bad. I take some tape and I tape the flopping transducer to my trolling motor so that it stops flopping around. It lasts like 2 minutes. I can't get it. It's all soaking wet. And I end up, this is one of the dumbest things I've ever done. But in the moment of panic, because I wasn't able to control my mindset at the time, I just cut it off. And I was like, screw it. Live scope's good enough anyways. I was like, maybe I can piece these back together. Spoiler alert, I can't. And now I don't have 360 this day because of that decision, which all could have been prevented if I could find my Allen key. So these downtime tasks might seem really small, and they might seem insignificant, and it might seem like really depressing, like, hey, I was making all this progress in whatever I was working towards, and now I can't make that progress right now. All I can do is these little things, I might not see a benefit from it right now, right away. It doesn't feel like I'm being super productive, but down the line, it makes a huge difference. And if you can't control, you got to control the controllables. If I can't control the workflow of the lab, I can't control these things that happen, at least right now, with the resources that I have. So I need to use my resources to the best of my ability and make progress where I can. So downtime tasks was huge mindset change for me. It allowed me to stay motivated during downtime. Another thing that I learned is how much the little things matter. So in the laboratory, when you're doing science, everything matters, right? That's why you have the protocols and procedures where you have to do everything the same way every time. Repeatability, the scientific method. One of the biggest things that emphasizes this point, I remember when I first started working at the lab, this is a key learning point, is how to have sterile technique. So when you're working with bacteria, you start with a growth medium that is sterile a lot of times, right? Well, always it's sterile. And then you inoculate it with something like some bacteria, or you're running a sterility test, so you want it to not be contaminated to affect the results. So you have these things called I don't remember what they're called, but it's just like a air vent hood. So you lift up the thing, you clean it out, and then it has an air vent inside of it, and it's kept sterile. So you do all your work in there, but you have to clean everything before you put it in there with alcohol so that you kill everything that's on it. And there's a whole procedure for that. And if you don't do it right, you could, infect something, contaminate something is the correct terminology. And if you don't sterilize your hands right, and you don't sterilize your gloves every time, so every time you go in and out, if you don't, you don't want to touch the wrong things, you got to hold your arms in a certain place, everything like the inoculation needle, how you hold that, where you put everything, how you organize the stuff, like, we want to go dirty to clean within the biosafety cabinet. That's what it's called. All these things matter. And I know this because early on, and occasionally you make mistakes and you mess up an experiment, and you have to redo the whole piece of that experiment, right? And it's extremely important. Little things matter so much. They have huge consequences down the line. And this is true in bass fishing as well. And I had this thought in the past, and it's somewhat true, right? There's some truth in this, that what matters is your ability to find fish, right? If I can find fish, I can cover a multitude of mistakes, right? I can just blank, like, because I'm just going to keep catching them, like all these little things. Like, these guys are spending all this time working on these like little nitpicky things, and I'm finding fish. I'm getting really good at this one thing that matters the most. But then you get an experience like my state tournament 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Iowa Bass Nation. It was split into 2 tournaments. So we had a spring tournament and a fall tournament. I won the spring tournament by the grace of God, literally. That was a blessing. I caught him in a way that usually doesn't win down there, and because I couldn't figure anything else out. Then fall rolls around. I've got a lot of confidence. I qualified for nationals. Summer, I'm rolling. I'm feeling good. I'm getting good with my live scope, my electronics, and I find some fish that I can use my live scope on in the river in an area that you're really not supposed to be able to do it. And I got them all to myself. Nobody else is down there. I don't have to walk through the lock and dam because we're on a crappy pool, the river. Day one, I catch them just fine. And I'm scoping them up. Then I run and I catch the big fish of the tournament without scope. And I'm like, oh man, we're good. Back in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, we're doing great, but there's something off, right? Well, I go out there the next day and I lose every one of them. I come in with like 4 fish, right? I had the bites to blow this tournament out of the water. I was leading after day 1. I had the bites to blow this thing out, and they all come off. And it came down to one mistake, which is out of convenience for me, I switched the rod and the hook combination that I was using for my drop shot, right? So I changed to a softer drop shot rod with the thicker gauge wire drop shot hook. So I wasn't, and I was Texas rigging it, right? So I wasn't penetrating through the lip of through the bait to the fish's mouth, and I was losing all these fish. And I ended up not winning points. I got 3rd, right? I led 3 out of 4 days of the total state tournament, and I got 3rd. Because this little thing that I did the day before during the tournament, the little things matter. Little things matter a lot. Little colors, little adjustments matter. You listen to these older guys talk, like Tom Mansour. I listened to a podcast about him talking these swim jigs, all these like little nitpicky things. They all matter. And obviously there's too many variables for me to control, but control what you can control and pay attention. That's what I learned. From the lab. Like, I could contaminate, ruin the whole experiment. If I don't document everything right, and then something goes wrong down the line and you can't trace back where it went wrong, you might have to blow the whole thing and redo it, because you have to have good science, right? Because if you're going to publish, it has to be really solid data. And yeah, you can't make those little mistakes. In the lab, I was like, well, if everything matters here, I wonder if, I started looking back at my tournament history. I'm like, okay, everything matters. All these little things, they all matter. Usually you get a little sense in the back of your mind, like, I don't know, maybe this doesn't, it matters. Check your knots, all that stuff. Next thing I learned from the lab, this is more of just how to approach troubleshooting. So it can be overwhelming at the lab when stuff goes wrong and you don't know what's going wrong, right? So you've got these protocols. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is novel, right? So you're trying to stay on the cutting edge of the field, because we do a lot of research and development at the lab, new projects and stuff. So a lot of stuff that we're doing, we're kind of figuring it out. And we have these protocols that should work. And we're trying to take these protocols, tweak them, and apply them to the specific type of science that we want to do. And things go wrong, of course. They always go wrong at first. And you don't know where in the process it's going wrong. And you got to figure that out. And it's overwhelming because there's so much that goes into it if you're controlling all these little variables. But the process for figuring out what's going wrong is take the first logical idea that you have and change it. So one logical thing that could be going wrong, right? Then just change it. See if that's the problem. Okay, isolate it. Isolate the variable. Okay, that's not the problem. Go to the next variable. Isolate it. That's not the problem. Go to the next variable. Isolate it. That's not the problem. On and on and on and on. All of this starts with the assumption or the truth that it has to be done. So not doing it or saying, oh, well, we can't do this experiment is not an option. It has to be done. That's my job. That's why we're there, right? To do this stuff. I started applying that mindset to fishing, both in figuring out patterns. Like, okay, I have to figure out this type of pattern, troubleshoot. Okay, this isn't working. Next logical variable. This isn't working. Next logical variable. But where it was really important for me was in like boat issues. So things break all the time. And you put a lot of effort and time and money, at least I do, into this dream, this goal, this plan, this execution. And something breaks. Oh crap. I don't have the resources to deal with this. And there's been times where I gave up in the past. That's embarrassing now, looking back at it, right? And I had a tournament where I broke my trolling motor bracket and I left. And I've had tournaments in the past too, where I didn't have a trolling motor that was working. I just showed up without a working trolling motor and fished with my big engine. But it was a mindset change, right? Because if you start with the assumption that I'm going to fish this tournament and I have to catch these fish no matter what. Like if I have to paddle a Ranger out past the off limits and then make a cast, that's what I got to do. So then you start with the assumption that, hey, I'm going to fish this tournament and work backwards from there. This experiment has to work. We have to figure it out, work backwards from there. What's the next logical thing? What's the next logical thing? What's the next logical thing? It also helps now that I have a bunch of engineer friends, so I can just call them up, hey, this is broken. What can I do? And it's like, okay, well, if you want to do it right, take it in. If you need to fish a tournament, here's what you can do to make it run for a little bit. I've done that with trolling motors a few times, all that stuff, and you get creative with troubleshooting. So just changing my mindset of, okay, this has to be done. Just take it one logical variable at a time and work through it. So just that mindset shift helped me a lot for tournaments. I had one specific tournament that I remember too, in Kentucky Lake, where there was a manufacturer defect with the motor. Not really defect, but they sent out like a notice about it. There's like this little screw that goes in and like halfway goes in and it's Loctited in. Sometimes that can vibrate loose, which can cause your whole trim pin system to like shift. So that happened and I didn't catch it right away. And so it shifted, and then the horizontal bolt shifted too. So it trimmed all the way down, as you do sometimes when you're getting on pad, and it punctured a hole in my trim pump, which is what allows the engine to go up and down. And so it was shorting out, and it seemed like it was like a relays, like it wouldn't trim up, and then we switched to relays and it would trim up, but it was actually just shorting out the trim pump. I figured that out tournament morning. What should I have done? We're in Kentucky Lake, Paris landing. I have an old tricks, right? I have 112 pound thrust. I should have just gone out and fished. I had live scope. The tournament, like multiple top 10s were made right outside that place. But I was like, all right, I can't fish. My engine's broken. I was stupid. You live and you learn. But if I would have had the mindset that I have in the lab, which is I have to fish, I have to figure this out. What's the next logical thing? What's the next logical thing? Could have been a different story. And then the last thing that I can think of, at least right now, that I'm cognitively aware that I've implemented is the idea of protocols and SOPs, or standard operating procedures. So obviously that's how we function in the lab. We have written protocols and SOPs for everything as simple as checking the temperature, right? We do it this way. So I started implementing that in bass fishing. And the reason that it's important for me is because in bass fishing, there's so many variables, so many things that can go wrong, so many different things that can affect your mind and your cognitive function, right? On the water all day, you have all these things go wrong, just jumbles your brain, jumbles your brains up a little bit. And so it's nice when something, when crap hits the fan, to have, okay, when this happens, I do this, 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 this. So if I have that preloaded in my mind as a protocol and SOP, I don't have any emotional response to something. I just expect things to go wrong when I go into a tournament now, right? And when something does go wrong, okay, the live well craps out. All right, what do? Number one, check the fuses. So I check the fuse box, see if I blow a fuse, because sometimes something will get stuck in the pump, it'll blow a fuse. Okay, that's not the problem. All right, check the pump, pull out the pump, make sure it's seated correctly, all that stuff. All right, that's not the problem. All right, replace the pump, I have a backup pump. Do all that stuff, go through step by step by step. And worst case, and then obviously the last thing you can possibly do is, all right, I still need to fish this tournament. I'm just gonna bail water every 30 minutes. So if it's a hot day, just keep bailing water. Leave the live well lids open so you can air exchange, and bail water and do it. Overfill the live wells. I have had to do that before, and it works like 60% of the time. I actually had to do that at Saginaw too. If it already wasn't bad enough in that tournament, my live wells also went out. And and it's nice because it doesn't cause the deer in the headlights freeze. It's faster because everything in bass fishing, I'm sure it's similar in a lot of different domains, but in bass fishing, it's all about speed of decision making and efficiency. And so if I have these preloaded protocols, standard operating procedures in my mind about the different things, even within the actual execution in a tournament, obviously mostly running off of intuition, right? And gut instinct and experience. But when you encounter like one of those like roads that go both ways, both paths look great. You could stand there and like deliberate. Or if you have a standard operating procedure, your mind would go, okay, under this set of circumstances, this is most likely to achieve the outcome that I'm desiring in this scenario. So boom, 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 boom. And obviously you can make creative decisions to go off of that path in tournament bass fishing. That's what makes it so fun. But if you have those SOPs, anytime you reach a moment of indecision, boom, standard operating procedure, boom, this is the protocol, this is the protocol, this is the protocol. And it just speeds up decision making. I've applied it to things outside of bass fishing as well. And it seems kind of dumb, right? Like, why would I take the time to think about, to write out all this stuff, like sit down and write out, okay, this goes wrong, and I do this, like actually write out each thing on a piece of paper. But it helps me, it solidifies it in my mind, and I have these plans, and I do it about a lot of the small things, like how I start my tournament morning, what time I set my alarm, what time I get up, where I'm sleeping in a campground or in a motel, what's the procedure for practice, charging my boat, what if there's no spots available for plugging in an outlet? What do you do? One of my buddies lent me a generator for the season. Shout out to Joe. But so that kind of solves that problem for me now. But yeah, just those things about being mentally prepared for it so there's no gap in decision making. And at the lab, it just standardizes everything. So it also helps with the scientific method in bass fishing, which is it operates like a science and an art at the same time, which is that you want to isolate what variables are important. So if you do things a certain way every time and then something changes, it's easier to, go back through the procedure. What did I do differently, or what environmentally was differently that affected the outcome? So that's just some of the things that I've applied specifically from working at the lab. I'm sure there's a lot more that I can't think of right now, but those are the top 4. So thank you.